My friends, life is filled with questions. Where will I go next? What will happen tomorrow? How will I get through this challenge? These questions can trouble our hearts and fill us with worry. But I want to remind you today, God will open the right door at the right time. You don't have to force it. You don't have to fear it. You just have to trust Him. Some of you have been praying for a breakthrough. You've been knocking on doors that won't seem to open. But let me tell you, when God closes a door, it is not a rejection. It is a redirection. He is leading you away from what is not meant for you and guiding you towards something greater. There is a passage that says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God." Worrying does not open doors. Faith does. Worry drains you, but faith sustains you. When we trust in God's perfect plan, we can walk with confidence even when we don't see the whole picture. Some of you might be saying, "But I've waited for so long." My friend, faith is not just about waiting. It is about waiting with expectation. It is believing that the God who created the universe is also orchestrating every step of your life. He has never failed, and He will not fail you now. Look back at your life. Some of the things you once prayed for, God didn't give you, and later you realized why. If He had given you what you wanted, you would have missed what was truly best. That is why we must trust that when God opens a door, it is the right door, and when He closes a door, it is the wrong one for us. So today, I encourage you, stop worrying, stop striving, rest in the assurance that God is in control. Keep walking in obedience. Keep seeking His wisdom. Keep believing that His plan is greater than anything you could ever imagine. And when the right door opens, you will see that His way was always the best way. God bless you. Life unfolds in ways that are often beyond our comprehension. We set our plans, create our timelines, and construct our expectations with the belief that things must happen when and how we envision them. And yet, the reality is that life rarely moves according to our personal schedules. The discomfort of waiting, the frustration of uncertainty, and the agony of unmet expectations can weigh heavily on the human spirit. But what if the timing of events, the unfolding of circumstances, and the progression of our journey were not entirely within our control? What if there was an order, one that we cannot always perceive, guiding us towards something far greater than we currently understand? People struggle with this idea because they crave control. The mind desires predictability, a structured path, and a sense of mastery over the environment. It is unsettling to acknowledge that so much of life operates outside of our immediate influence. This is why waiting, especially when it comes to significant life events, can be agonizing. A person who has worked tirelessly for years expects promotion at a certain time. Another who has longed for companionship hopes to meet the right person within a specific season of life. The student who is invested in learning anticipates success upon graduation. And yet, the doors do not always open when expected. This can lead to resentment, bitterness, and even despair. But consider this. If every event in life unfolded precisely when we desired, would we truly grow? Would we develop resilience, patience, or wisdom? Would we learn the value of persistence? The greatest transformations occur in the space between wanting and receiving. That period of waiting, of uncertainty, of longing. This is where a person is refined. It is in these moments that character is forged, priorities are tested, and wisdom is cultivated. And so the waiting itself becomes an essential part of the process. Some might argue that if the outcome is predetermined, if certain doors are destined to open or remain closed, then human effort is meaningless. But this is not the case. Action is required. It is necessary to move forward, to seek opportunities, to develop skills, and to cultivate discipline. However, there is a difference between effort and force. To act with purpose and direction is admirable. To attempt to force an outcome that is not yet meant to be is an exercise in futility. When people force timing, they often make choices that lead to unnecessary suffering. They accept jobs that do not align with their true purpose simply because they feel pressured to achieve a certain status by a certain age. They enter relationships that are not suited for them out of fear that waiting will leave them alone. They compromise values, cut corners, and make decisions that, in hindsight, lead to regret. But when a person exercises patience, when they trust that the right door will open at the right time, they avoid these pitfalls. They understand that delays are not denials. Instead, delays provide an opportunity to grow, to reassess, and to prepare. There is a great difference between stagnation and patience. To be stagnant is to refuse to move, to resist growth, to be paralyzed by fear or laziness. Patience, on the other hand, is active. It is a conscious decision to keep moving forward, to keep improving, while understanding that certain outcomes will unfold only when the conditions are right. And those conditions are often outside of immediate control. A tree does not bear fruit before its time. A building is not stable if the foundation is rushed. Likewise, a person who is given what they desire before they are ready to handle it may find that what they once longed for becomes a burden rather than a blessing. The challenge then is to develop the kind of perspective that allows for both effort and patience. It is to recognize that the process matters just as much as the destination. It is to acknowledge that waiting is not wasted time if it is spent growing, learning, and preparing. It is to understand that what is meant to be will come at the right time, not necessarily when it is wanted, but when it is truly needed. This is not an easy mindset to adopt. It requires discipline, self-awareness, and the ability to tolerate discomfort. But those who embrace this way of thinking find that they are less anxious, less frustrated, and more at peace with the present moment. They do not live in a state of desperation, but rather in one of confidence. Confidence that they are being guided towards something meaningful, something that aligns with their true purpose. And when that right moment finally arrives, when the door opens and they step through, they will realize that it was worth the wait. They will see that every delay had a purpose. Every obstacle was a lesson, and every moment of uncertainty was shaping them into the person who was ready to receive what was meant for them. So, the challenge is this: to trust the timing of your life, not to become passive, not to surrender effort, but to recognize that some things cannot be rushed. Keep moving forward. Keep improving. Keep becoming the person who is ready for the doors that will open. And when they do, you will walk through them knowing that you arrived at exactly the right time. Worry is a natural response to uncertainty. It is the mind's attempt to wrestle with the unknown, to impose some form of structure onto chaos. People worry because they fear what they cannot control. They fear failure, rejection, loss, and unpredictability. And yet, despite its overwhelming presence, worry does nothing to change the reality of a situation. It does not alter the future, nor does it prevent negative outcomes. Instead, it paralyzes, distorts perception, and drains a person's energy in ways that make them less capable of dealing with the very challenges they fear. Anxiety is, at its core, an anticipation of suffering. It is the mind's way of trying to prepare for every possible negative scenario, running endless simulations in an attempt to minimize risk. But the problem is that these simulations rarely, if ever, correspond exactly to reality. The mind constructs worst-case scenarios, exaggerates threats, and convinces itself that disaster is imminent, even when there is little reason to believe so. And in doing so, it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. A person who constantly worries about failure may become so consumed by fear that they underperform, ensuring the very failure they sought to avoid. Someone who worries excessively about rejection may behave with insecurity and hesitation, pushing others away in the process. Worry is not merely unproductive, it is counterproductive. This is where trust becomes essential. Trust is not blind optimism. It is not a naive belief that everything will always go perfectly. Instead, trust is the recognition that while one cannot control everything, one can control how they respond to life's challenges. Trust is the disciplined refusal to be consumed by fear, the decision to move forward despite uncertainty. It is an act of courage. It says, I will do what I can, and I will not allow what I cannot control to dominate my mind. There is an underlying assumption in worry that suggests that if one thinks about a problem long enough, they will eventually solve it. But this is not how complex issues are resolved. Action solves problems. Clear thinking solves problems. Worry does not. A person can sit and worry about their future for hours, days, or years, but until they take meaningful steps toward a solution, nothing changes. It is far more beneficial to focus on what is within one's control, to take responsibility for what can be done and let go of the obsession with what cannot. Consider how much time people waste worrying about things that never actually happen. Most of what people fear will go wrong never does, and yet the mind treats these imagined catastrophes as if they are imminent threats. This creates unnecessary suffering. It depletes energy that could have been spent on constructive action. It keeps people trapped in cycles of doubt and hesitation. But imagine the alternative. Imagine a life where worry is replaced by trust, where a person wakes up in the morning, does their best, and refuses to let fear dictate their action. That person will be far more effective, far more capable, and far more at peace than the one who spends their time consumed by hypothetical disasters. The reality is that the future will come, whether one worries about it or not. And when it does, it will bring challenges, as life always does. But those challenges are best met with a clear mind, a focused will, and a spirit that is not weighed down by constant anxiety. Trusting that the right doors will open at the right time does not mean passively waiting for opportunities to appear. It means moving forward with faith that the right opportunities will emerge as a result of discipline, effort, and preparation. It means recognizing that some things are beyond control and refusing to let those things dictate one's peace of mind. People often look back on their lives and realize that many of their greatest fears never materialized. The failures they once dreaded led to greater opportunities. The closed doors they once resented turned out to be necessary redirections. And in the moments when they felt the most lost, something unexpected happened. Something they could not have planned for, something that changed their trajectory in a way they never anticipated. If this has happened before, why should it not happen again? Why should one assume that the future will be devoid of the same patterns of guidance, opportunity, and unexpected growth? The challenge then is to break free from the habit of worry, to shift focus from fear to action, from anxiety to trust. To recognize that while preparation is necessary, obsession over the unknown is not. A person must train themselves to let go of what they cannot change and commit fully to what they can. They must learn to quiet the mental noise that seeks to drown them in doubt and replace it with clarity, purpose, and resolve. There is freedom in choosing trust over worry. It is the freedom to move forward without the burden of constant fear. It is the ability to embrace challenges with confidence rather than hesitation. It is the capacity to live fully rather than be consumed by what might go wrong. And when a person masters this, they find that life itself opens up in ways they never imagined. They see that the very act of trusting, of releasing fear, creates opportunities that worry never could. They understand that the right doors will open, not because they forced them, but because they walked forward with faith and determination. And when that realization sinks in, they are no longer bound by worry. They are free. Life is a series of opportunities and obstacles, of open doors and closed ones. People often assume that a closed door is an indication of failure, that it is proof of their inadequacy or of some great cosmic injustice working against them. But this is an incredibly limited and even dangerous way of perceiving reality. A closed door is not always a rejection. It is often a form of protection. It is a boundary set by forces beyond our immediate understanding to prevent us from walking into something that would ultimately harm us or divert us from a path more suited to our development. Human beings are wired to want control. They make plans, set expectations, and construct elaborate visions of what their future should look like. When reality does not align with those visions, when a job does not materialize, when a relationship dissolves, when an ambition is cut short, the immediate reaction is often frustration, bitterness, or even despair. People assume that if they desire something, they must obtain it. And if they do not, then something has gone terribly wrong. But this assumption is flawed. It presupposes that every desire is worth pursuing and that human judgment in its limited scope is sufficient to determine what is best in every circumstance. It is not. Consider the number of times people have pursued something only to later realize that it was never right for them in the first place. A career path that seemed promising but led to burnout. A relationship that appeared fulfilling but revealed itself to be toxic. A financial decision that at first seemed wise but later brought ruin. People are often blind to the long-term consequences of their choices. They are unable to see the hidden dangers behind what they think they need. And so, when a door closes, it is sometimes the best thing that could happen. It prevents them from stepping into something that would have consumed them, exhausted them, or left them trapped in a situation they were never meant to be in. The challenge, then, is not to resent closed doors, but to understand them, to view them not as a punishment, but as a necessary correction. This is extraordinarily difficult because it requires a person to confront the limits of their own knowledge. It forces them to acknowledge that they do not always know what is best, that their perspective is finite, that their understanding is often clouded by short-term desires rather than long-term wisdom. This realization is humbling, but it is also liberating. It removes the burden of believing that one must force every opportunity to work, that every failed attempt is a personal deficiency rather than a course correction. Some of the greatest individuals in history have encountered closed doors that at the time seemed like devastating losses. But those very losses led them to paths that shaped their destiny. A scientist rejected by one institution goes on to make groundbreaking discoveries elsewhere. An artist who is overlooked by critics finds an audience that truly values their work. A leader who faces setbacks in one domain finds their true calling in another. The common thread among these stories is not the absence of failure, but the ability to recognize failure as redirection rather than defeat. This is not an argument for passivity. It is not an excuse for people to give up at the first sign of difficulty. There is a difference between a challenge that must be overcome and a door that is simply not meant to be walked through. The difficulty lies in discerning between the two. That discernment comes with experience, with reflection, and with an ability to detach from immediate emotions in order to see the bigger picture. It requires asking, is this truly the path for me, or am I merely attached to the idea of it because I fear the unknown? When a person learns to see closed doors in this way, they become far more resilient. They stop viewing life as a series of disappointments and instead begin to see it as an unfolding journey, one that is guided not merely by their own will, but by the larger forces at play. They develop the ability to move forward without resentment, to trust that if one opportunity does not work out, another will. And often they find that the opportunities that come later are far greater than the ones they initially sought. But to reach this point, one must be willing to let go. They must release their grip on what they think they need and instead be open to what is actually meant for them. This does not mean abandoning effort. It means directing that effort wisely. It means understanding that some doors are closed, not to punish, but to protect. And when a person finally accepts this truth, they stop living in frustration. They move forward with greater clarity, greater confidence, and a greater sense of peace. They realize that what they once saw as a loss was, in fact, one of the best things that could have happened. And that understanding changes everything. Patience is not merely waiting. It is waiting with discipline, with composure, and with a willingness to endure uncertainty without allowing it to consume you. People often misunderstand patience. They mistake it for passivity, as if to be patient means to sit idly by while the world moves forward. But true patience is an active state of being. It is the ability to hold faith in the process, to continue working, striving, and improving, even when the results are not immediately apparent. The problem with impatience is that it leads to impulsivity. When people do not see immediate results, they panic. They make desperate decisions, settle for less than what they are capable of achieving, or force situations that are not yet ready to unfold. They rush into relationships out of fear of being alone. They take jobs that do not align with their purpose because they feel pressured to prove themselves. They abandon meaningful pursuits because the reward does not come quickly enough. And in doing so, they sabotage themselves. Impatience is not just a mild character flaw. It is a dangerous trait that leads people away from what is truly meant for them. There is a reason why the most meaningful accomplishments in life take time. Mastery, success, wisdom. These are not things that can be achieved overnight. They require years of effort, discipline, and refinement. A person who rushes through their development will always find themselves lacking in the qualities necessary to sustain real success. Consider the artist who demands recognition before they have refined their craft. The entrepreneur who expects massive success without first learning how to manage the responsibility that comes with it. The individual who seeks deep relationships without first becoming someone capable of maintaining them. In every case, impatience leads to premature expectations, and premature expectations lead to failure. The irony is that what people most desire, whether it be success, stability, love, or fulfillment, often comes to those who are willing to endure the waiting process. This is not because the universe rewards patience arbitrarily, but because those who cultivate patience also cultivate the strength required to handle what they receive. If a person is not prepared for what they are asking for, receiving it will not be a blessing but a burden. And so the waiting period, the time spent in uncertainty, is not wasted. It is necessary. It is what shapes a person into someone who is capable of managing the very things they hope for. People often look at others who have succeeded and assume they simply had luck, that opportunities fell into their laps without struggle. But if you dig deeper, if you look beyond the surface, you will find that behind every success story is a long period of waiting, of refining, of silent battles fought in obscurity. The great writer was once someone who spent years perfecting their craft without recognition. The leader was once someone who spent decades learning, failing, and growing before they were ready for responsibility. The athlete, the musician, the scientist, each of them had to endure frustration, setbacks, and uncertainty before their breakthrough came. The real challenge is in maintaining composure during the waiting. Many people start strong. They have ambition, motivation, and energy. But when they do not see results immediately, they begin to waver. They question whether they are on the right path. They compare themselves to others who seem to be progressing faster. They grow frustrated, discouraged, and eventually abandon what they started. This is why so many dreams go unfulfilled. Not because they were impossible, but because the people pursuing them did not have the endurance to see them through. So what is the alternative? The alternative is to shift focus. Instead of being consumed by the outcome, a person must learn to embrace the process. They must see each day as an opportunity to improve, even if the progress is invisible. They must trust that the work they put in now will bear fruit in the future, even if they cannot see it yet. And most importantly, they must resist the urge to force things before their time. A tree does not bear fruit before its season. A building is not stable if its foundation is rushed. A person who is given everything they desire too soon will not appreciate it, nor will they know how to sustain it. Everything worth having requires preparation, and preparation takes time. The most powerful thing a person can do is to remain steadfast in their efforts while surrendering their need for immediate gratification. to keep moving forward, even when the reward is not yet visible, to trust that what is meant for them will arrive when they are ready to receive it. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that there is an order to things, that some doors open only when the time is right, and that patience is not about waiting passively, but about growing actively. And when that moment finally comes, when all the effort, the discipline, and the endurance culminate in an opportunity that is finally within reach, it will not feel like luck. It will feel like the natural result of all the unseen preparation that came before it. Those who rush will never know this feeling, but those who understand the value of patience will experience a level of fulfillment that cannot be obtained in any other way. People often attempt to force things before their time. They grow impatient, dissatisfied with the natural pace at which life unfolds, and they believe that by sheer force of will, they can bend reality to fit their expectations. But this approach is deeply flawed. It ignores the fact that certain things require time, growth, and preparation before they can properly take form. When a person tries to push something forward that is not yet ready, they invite frustration, failure, and even destruction upon themselves. There is an arrogance in believing that one knows exactly how and when things should happen. People convince themselves that they must have something now, that the job must be secured immediately, that the relationship must materialize instantly, that success should come without the necessary foundation being built. But reality does not conform to these demands. It moves according to a rhythm that is far more complex than human impatience can comprehend. And when people refuse to recognize this, they suffer needlessly. This does not mean that action is unimportant, quite the opposite. Meaningful action is crucial, but action must be aligned with wisdom, with an understanding of timing and preparedness. It is not enough to simply want something. One must also be in the right state to receive it. People fail to consider this. They assume that if they desire something, they are automatically prepared for it. But often, they are not. They lack the experience, the discipline, or the emotional resilience required to handle what they are asking for. And so when they try to force a situation that is beyond their current capacity, they inevitably encounter failure or disillusionment. Consider the individual who desperately wants to be in a relationship, not because they are truly ready for one, but because they are afraid of being alone. They may pursue a connection aggressively, pressuring another person into something that has not yet had the chance to develop naturally. But relationships that are forced in this way rarely last. They are built on insecurity rather than genuine compatibility. The person pushing for love does not stop to ask whether they are the kind of person who is capable of sustaining a deep, meaningful bond. They are too fixated on the outcome to recognize that they themselves may be the very obstacle preventing it. The same is true for careers. Someone may seek a position of authority, believing that a title or a higher salary will bring them fulfillment. But if they have not yet developed the skills, the resilience, or the leadership necessary for that role, they will struggle once they obtain it. They may find themselves overwhelmed, unprepared for the pressure that comes with greater responsibility. And then, rather than feeling satisfied, they feel crushed under the weight of what they were not yet ready to handle. The reality is that there is a natural process of growth that cannot be circumvented. A tree does not bear fruit overnight. It must first take root, develop a strong trunk, and extend its branches before it can sustain the weight of its own harvest. If a person were to try to force the process, if they were to artificially accelerate the growth of the tree without ensuring its foundation was strong, it would collapse under its own weight. And yet, this is exactly what people attempt to do in their own lives. They want the rewards without the necessary development. They want the fruit before the roots have taken hold. There is wisdom in allowing things to unfold as they should. This does not mean being passive or simply waiting for life to hand out opportunities. It means preparing oneself fully so that when the right opportunity arises, one is truly ready to embrace it. It means recognizing that some things require patience, that forcing something before its time is not only ineffective but often damaging. The challenge is learning to differentiate between persistence and force. Persistence is noble. It means continuing to put in effort, refining one's abilities, and remaining committed to the process. But force is different. Force is an attempt to control what is not yet within one's grasp. It is rooted in impatience, in an unwillingness to accept that some things cannot be rushed. A person must ask themselves, am I truly ready for what I am pursuing, or am I simply desperate for an outcome? This question demands honesty, and honesty is often uncomfortable. It requires a person to confront their own inadequacies, their own lack of preparation, but this confrontation is necessary, because if a person acknowledges where they still need to grow, they can actually do something about it. They can focus on strengthening their foundation rather than trying to build on unstable ground. And when the time is right, when all the necessary pieces have fallen into place, things will move forward naturally. The right doors will open, not because they were forced open, but because the individual became the kind of person who was truly ready to walk through them. There will be no need for desperation, for manipulation, or for frustration. The process will feel organic, as if it was always meant to happen that way. People who understand this live with a sense of peace. They are not constantly grasping, not trying to impose their will upon every situation. They trust the process, not because they are passive, but because they recognize that real success, real fulfillment comes not from forcing things before their time, but from growing into the kind of person who naturally attracts the right opportunities. The choice then is clear. One can either spend their life trying to force doors open, exhausting themselves in the process, or they can focus on becoming truly prepared so that when the door finally does open, they have the strength, the wisdom, and the capability to walk through it with confidence.